Hi everyone. Is it annoying for people if I sit here or should I stand up? Maybe I'll do like a mixture because I'm aware that people at the back might not be able to see. Yeah, okay, cool, I got it. I might have to like bend down to do my slides though. Cool, so my name is Katy and I'm a freelance animation director and animator. I have been working for maybe like 2 years in this industry, and often clients come to me directly for work, and I've worked on a variety of projects ranging from music videos to editorial content for magazines, and also sometimes some GIFs like these stickers that I made for Giphy, which was really fun to do. I'm from Oxfordshire, which is not too far from London. This is a drawing I did when I was 7 years old, and that's a drawing I did last year. So, I've really improved a lot, as you can see. Actually, I think my drawings were better when I was younger. This is a selection of some of my work that I've done. I work predominantly with 2D frame-by-frame animation, and I use Photoshop to design my work and also do cleanup and coloring. And I use Adobe Flash/Animate to animate it, and then I composite in After Effects and do the final exports from Premiere. And that's usually the order that every project goes in terms of like software that I use. And I use Photoshop because you can use all the really cool brushes, like Carl's brushes, which I'm sure a lot of you know about. And I find that it's the most direct way to kind of do the style that I want to do without any kind of barriers. I made a new show reel recently, which isn't actually online, but it'll probably be up by the time the video for this talk goes up, so I'll just show it to you guys now. Sorry, I'll just start that again. And yeah, as Hannah said, I've recently signed with Blink Inc., which is super exciting. This GIF represents my reaction when I found out I was going to be represented by them, because honestly, I thought it wasn't going to happen. I thought I would just go and have a chat with them because I've been a big fan of their work for ages, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to go for a chat with them and just ask if they'd be interested in signing me without any expectation. And then after like 2 conversations, they were like, yeah, we'd be happy to sign you. So I'm really excited to see where that relationship goes and hopefully get some bigger budget work in, which I haven't done yet. So that would be nice to just do something really commercial and earn a lot of money from it. So I'm going to talk a bit about how my style originated and where that came from. But I also wanted to say a little bit about the word style, which for me has always been a really tricky word to think about, because when I was at uni, I got so hung up on thinking about style and trying to be developing my own style really quickly, because you feel like you have to develop it really quickly to get work in this industry, which is true to an extent, but I think there's way too much pressure put on students especially to do that. And I get quite a few students asking me how did you develop your style? How do I get a style? As if it's an end point that you get to. But I think it's more important to think about it as being deeper than just surface level appearance. And for me, I'd like my work to have a consistent voice throughout it. So even though at the moment it looks like this, I would love to do some work in different techniques. So I've recently made a live action short film, and I'd love to work more in that medium. And I think often when you see older directors who've worked for ages in this industry, they have loads of different work done in loads of different mediums, but you can kind of see a consistent strand of themes and ideas that run through all of them. So that's what I'm hoping to get to as well. But yeah, in terms of the style, it sort of came from the fact that I taught myself how to animate using Photoshop. So this is the first ever 2D animation I made on my Art Foundation course. There you go. Now for me to load up my presentation again. This screen is so big, it's really hard to tell where my cursor is. Okay, cool. So yeah, I made this on my Art Foundation quite a few years ago. I thought I was being a really cool kid by animating a load of dirty stuff and drugs and whatever. So for this, I used a really tedious process because this was before I knew about the timeline function in Photoshop. So in order to animate it, I drew the first frame on a layer, and then I made a new layer but turned the opacity down so that it acted like an onion skin. And then I saved all the layers as individual images, which I then mass imported into a video editing software. And then I could play back my animation. So I did this for 2 years, and even by the time I got to Kingston for my final year film, I did it like this as well, and then I learned about the timeline, thank God. So I went to Kingston after my Art Foundation, and here is some of the work I made during that time. As you can see, it's a super crazy mixture of different things. Even though the course was called Illustration Animation, the tutors pushed us to work in loads of different mediums and techniques, and the emphasis was always about your idea and concept rather than the style and execution of it. So I found the course really weird and tough. It wasn't until third year where my confidence started to come back again. At the end of first year, I wanted to make a short film for the final project. it was my first time living in London, and even though Kingston isn't really in London, I was doing an internship for a few months, which involved me having to commute to London during rush hour. And that was my first experience of doing that on the Underground, and it was such a memorable physical experience of feeling like really stressed and hot. And I wanted to make something that would kind of replicate that feeling. So I tried to think of a way that I could combine the really cool seat patterns with that theme. I don't think I have time to show you guys, but it's online if you want to see it. So these are some GIFs from the final film. I ended up animating the patterns so that they would mimic the movement on the Underground. So like these are meant to be the escalators, and these are meant to be the beeping of the doors before they close. And then this is a ticket barrier, and these are also escalators. And I just recorded a bunch of sounds on my phone and sort of mixed that all up to go with the visuals. So fast forwarding a bit, I'm gonna talk more in detail about a recent job I did, which by the time the video for this talk goes up, it should be online, but it's not technically online yet, but I'm gonna show you guys anyway, because it's a good job for me to talk to you guys about. All right, give me like 2 hours for me to just sort this out. Okay. Oh yeah, before I start this, so the project came from California Sunday Magazine, and they were commissioning a series of videos called Outer Monologues, and this video is along with a bunch of other animations as well. And each video is like a cut down version of interviews they've done with various people, I think like people in Hollywood. So this video is about the actor Joy Bryant, who's been in Skeleton Key, don't know if anyone's seen that, and a bunch of other random movies I haven't seen. And she is talking about a moment in her life where on the inside she was freaking out, but on the outside she had to keep it cool. That's why it's called Outer Monologues. So yeah, I designed and directed this, and I also did a little bit of animation on it as well, and I worked with Hannah, who basically did all of the best bits of animation you can see. And I also worked with 2 or 3 other animators on this as well. So I'll just show you guys.
I'm from the Bronx. I grew up in a household where we didn't have a lot of money. And I got this scholarship to this prestigious boarding school in Connecticut, which was going to give me this great opportunity to get a really great education. I thought I was prepared for it in a way. I mean, I was excited to go. I didn't go there kicking and screaming. But when I got there, I mean, it was a complete culture shock. Coming from a predominantly Black and Latino environment to one that is white and extremely wealthy, like obscenely wealthy, was the lot for a 13-year-old poor Black girl from the Bronx to kind of take in and then try and navigate. I dived right in. I was already first semester. I was on honor roll. I got elected to student council. I was on the sports teams. I had lots of friends. On the surface, I looked like I had it pretty together, but inside, I was having like a clash of civilizations. I assumed that because those kids were rich, they were smarter than me. Something clicked eventually my junior year, where I realized from being in the school for 2 years and getting to know all these kids, it was like, hey, wait a minute. Sometimes the richest kid in school is the dumbest kid in school. And if that's the case, then one of the poorest kids in school could be the smartest kid in school. Now, I wasn't the smartest kid, but I wasn't a dummy. Anyway, that really shook my whole kind of understanding of like, oh wow, wealth can provide security and wealth can provide access to things, but it cannot make you smarter. Once I realized that, it was like my inner world and my outer world synced. And then I didn't have an inferiority complex. And the thing that my grandmother had always taught me, which escaped me for those first couple of years I was at school, was that no one's better than you and you're no better than anybody else. Once I cracked that code, it was like, oh, wait a minute. I was like liberated from this feeling of unworthiness. And then I got on high honors. That's the year I got into Yale. That is the transition that actually really set me on a path that I'm on now, even though I never thought that I would be an actor or writer or in anything like in terms of entertainment. It still set me on my path. As you get older, you start to have a more realistic view of the world and life and the ups and downs, and you have the experience. But then that experience and that knowledge tends to undercut your faith sometimes. Sounds counterintuitive, but it does. If you can kind of mesh the two of those things, it's on. It doesn't mean that you're not going to feel doubtful or insecure, because those, like, you can't, I can't get rid of that shit. That's the story of my life. I haven't mastered it. I don't think I ever will, but it's getting easier and easier to get myself out of that funk, so that what's going on inside of me, what's going on outside of me are on the level and there's no imbalance. That's my quest in life, is to sort of match the two.
Cool. So I got an email about this job last April, and they were like, we want to commission this video. But I didn't actually start working on this until January this year. So there was like a huge delay between actually receiving the first email and actually starting the job. At the time, I was repped by Partisan, which is a different production company, and I decided to pass the job on to my producer, which I'm really glad he did, because all of that time spent back and forth over email I didn't have to do, which was really nice. I don't know what the hang up exactly was with the client. I think they were trying to like gather all of the interview material they needed to commission the whole series. But yeah, I didn't start working on it until January. And then we got the green light on the project. I got the final script and voiceover. And usually before I start any project, I just get my sketchbook and I do like really rough thumbnails, and I'll listen to the audio that they give me again and again, and I'll just try and draw whatever comes to mind. And I find drawing these thumbnails really useful because it's not like a proper storyboard at that point, so it doesn't feel as intimidating. But for me personally, I find storyboarding really hard and tedious because well, it's such an important part of the process, because when you're working with a client, it's the best way to show them exactly what you're going to do and make sure that they don't get any surprises later down the line when it actually comes to animating it, because then they know what they're going to see before you've actually made it. But for me, it takes a lot of time for me to like get my ideas down clearly enough so that they understand it. Whereas obviously if you're working on a personal project, you don't have to report to anyone. You can just sort of do whatever you want. But yeah, this part I always find hard because like it's really hard to ignore that voice in your head, which is being really analytical and critical at this stage. But I think it's best to try and ignore that and just draw stuff, even though it looks really shit, because you're the only one that is looking at it at this stage anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And you can see that some of the like compositions didn't actually change that much, even for the final film, like this bit. And that's because I'm trying to have more faith in my original drawings more and more now. Like I used to think that I had to develop my drawings loads before they were like good enough, but now I just kind of have more faith in my original drawings, because I think often they can be your best ideas because you just do them very kind of like free flow and they feel a lot more organic. And also often in jobs there's actually not enough time to develop storyboards and like constantly redo compositions. So I think it's best to just, once you've got an idea for a scene, just like go with it if it works. So then once I do that, I draw them up neater in Photoshop, and I just basically save them all as images and then put them in a Google Slides presentation for the client. So these slides are taken from the very first storyboard I did, which, as you can see, is quite different. This bit stayed the same, this character, because I thought it was just a really simple and effective way of showing the very abstract things she's talking about when she's talking about her inner confidence. But as you can see, there's a lot of like really complex character animation in this, like when she lands on the giant aeroplane and when she falls off the aeroplane. And this bit when she's running up the giant mountain of objects and there's this mad camera move that goes all the way around her, then zooms in on her face. It was at this point in the project when the client was like, oh, actually, you don't have 2 or 3 months to do this, we need it in a month, which was like a complete curveball and really, really stressed me out. So I had to go back and just simplify loads of the storyboard, and I think I completely redrew the storyboard maybe 2 or 3 times. And then, so I got to this, where the compositions are pretty much exactly how they are in the final video. But then some parts stayed the same, like this. So yeah, that was very stressful to hear about the new deadline. These are some style frames I did at the start of the project when I submitted the very first storyboard. And these are the style frames that I did, that I redid, which I think are a lot better. For me, colour is becoming more and more of an important part of my work, and I think when you find a good colour palette, it just like feels so good. I don't really have much of a process behind how I pick my colours other than like using the eyedropper in Photoshop and then just seeing what feels really nice when I see a colour together. But I try to design all of my style frames for every scene before they're all animated, which I find is really important to do if you're working with other animators, because then they know exactly what to animate in a scene, because everything is locked in the composition in terms of the position of the shapes and objects. And also I like to put all the style frames in a big grid like this, because it gives me a good overall idea of how the film is looking and whether the colour palette works together and whether any parts of the film need to have more or less of a specific colour. So I learned a lot of lessons from this job. Basically, bad things lead to better things. Feedback usually does improve the project. This is how I feel when I receive feedback, and this is how I feel now looking back on the project. Like actually quite glad that I did redo the storyboard and style frames, because I mean I think they're like a lot better. So like I hate receiving feedback, and I think everyone can kind of relate to that. I think it's something that only gets easier the more experience you gain. You kind of get less affected by it, or at least that's what I'm telling myself. But yeah, feedback is usually good. Unless they don't actually know what they're talking about, then you should defend your idea and tell them why they're wrong. And then in my experience, they usually actually are like, okay, after that. So the second thing is that even though the job was delayed so much and I had so much anxiety about when it was going to start, I was like, is this job going to start next week or next month? It was really frustrating. I didn't know what the holdup was, and it meant I didn't know whether I could take on other work. But the good thing is that I used that time to freelance on another director's project, which was Hannah Jacobs, and she was doing a job at the time where I was working in a team with a bunch of other animators, which included Hannah. And it was through that project that I met Hannah, Bianca, and Matt, who I then got to help me animate on this project. So if I hadn't have done that before I started this, I wouldn't have known who to get for my project, because at the time I didn't really know that many good frame-by-frame animators, and it was really great to be able to see how they work in real life. But now, thanks to this community, like we all know everyone, so that's really great. Looking back on it, I wish I maybe pushed the design a bit more, or maybe pushed the style of it, because I think I got so scared with the new deadline, maybe I played it too safe, but that's just my own personal criticism of it. So I don't know how we're doing for time. Okay, I'll just really quickly talk about this project, which is my favourite project I've done so far. I probably won't show it to you guys right now, but you can watch it online. It's a music video I did for Tom Rosenthal, and he basically got in touch with me last year and was like, do you want to do a music video? There's no deadline, and also you get 100% creative freedom, and also you can choose which song you want to do. So I was like this is basically like a dream job. The job came at a really good time where I was really wanting to do more of a personal project, and because there was no deadline and there was complete creative freedom, I decided to treat it like a personal project. So I kind of did it over like maybe 5 or 6 months, and I worked in between jobs and also took a bit of time off in order to do it. And the story is really simple. It's for the sleepy version of his song Forest, so it's very quiet and cozy and like cute. And I did a story of a little bear that's in the back seat of his parents' car, and they're driving through a mountain landscape, and then the mountains start coming alive and he goes on this crazy adventure before falling back in his car. This project was so nice to do because I was working just by myself, which like can either feel really lonely and horrible or can actually feel really nice after you've done a job with lots of other people. To necessarily explain that to anyone else, I could just sort of try it out. So these are some drawings I did when I started listening to the song. And like, I don't think I'm very good at drawing for myself. Like I don't actually do it a lot, and it's something I want to get better at. But these came out and I was like, oh, I kind of like this. Like I wasn't worried about how they were looking. Like they came out really naive and childlike, and I thought it suited the song. And again, going back to that whole thing of like having faith in your original drawings, I really liked the way that this car came out, how it's like totally incorrect in terms of its perspective and you can see through it, and also how the dog like looks like a soft toy. I really like those elements, so I decided to I kept it through into the final video. And these are the storyboards I did, which again, like the compositions are pretty much exactly the same as they are in the final video. And with the dog, I was just embracing this whole thing of like, I don't care how 4-legged animals are animated, I'm just gonna do it how I wanna do it, and it doesn't matter. So that gets me to this whole thing of like, I'm realizing more and more that for me personally, incorrectly drawn things are way more interesting and enjoyable for me to animate, because I think animation just has so much like potential to like bend the rules of reality and animate all sorts of different objects and shapes, and like what's the point of animating something that could have been filmed in live action? So for me it's really exciting to see, like, I want to see how far I can get away with animating something whilst people still understanding what they're actually looking at, if that makes sense. And I'm also always trying to think of like what's the quickest and simplest way that I can communicate this idea, because animation takes so friggin' long. I'm trying to always think of like, okay, do I need to design it in this way? Is that going to take ages to animate? I think that way of thinking has sort of come naturally as a result of having like tight deadlines for jobs. Like you're always trying to like problem solve and think of like animating things that look really cool but actually don't take as much time to do. So to end on this talk, I just wanted to talk about work-life balance, because that's definitely the biggest lesson I've learned. I can definitely be a bit of a workaholic and I really enjoy what I do, but I've learned to have a better work-life balance. And there's just so much more to life than just working in animation, which I keep trying to tell myself and not feel guilty about, you know, not doing personal projects, because I don't really do that at the moment. Yeah, wait, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, I think it can be really hard to not feel guilty about that, because there's this like really weird, toxic, like workaholic culture going on right now, where like, I don't know if you see on like Twitter or Instagram, but loads of people like boasting about how they've worked like late nights and they're doing like all-nighters, and like as if they're glamorizing it. And for me, that's something that is like really annoying, because there's nothing glamorous about doing an all-nighter. But anyway, that's just me ranting. I think it's so important to like, you know, have lots of sleep and make sure you're enjoying doing things that aren't animation. Yeah, just make sure that you have a life outside of work, basically, which I'm still trying to do. Thank you.